Welcome, 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 people. I'll start in just a moment, making sure everyone's getting logged in okay. I see some familiar faces from the workshop or the webinar last week, so it's good to see you again. Because our time is limited, I'm going to kind of dive in. I thank you for attending today. My name is Larry Keiser. I'm the program director for the Creativity and Innovation programs. You're here to learn about or to get more information about creative school classrooms, what they kind of look like and how you can create one, kind of the underpinning and the mindset involved in developing such. If you're here, you probably glean that designing and redefining the spaces, both the physical space, the virtual spaces, in which students learn and in which we work, is key to thriving in this new normal, or what the Human Resource Development Program at Drexel calls the new abnormal. Drexel's faculty in the School of Education's Creativity and Innovation programs believed pre-COVID-19 that creativity was an untapped solution fountain for both education, businesses, corporations, and we believe it even more strongly and passionately now, particularly as we struggle as a community and collectively to safely reboot our economy and determine how we're going to operate this fall, particularly in terms of school and work. We believe that education leaders and teachers, business, corporation leaders and their employees, that by adopting a creative mindset and approach to the way that they operate and solve issues within their organizational structures and the individual workplaces and classroom settings, they will aid significantly in helping children achieve both academically as well as provide them with the creativity mindset and the essential skills that they need to develop to thrive in the the second quarter of the 21st century that's quickly fast approaching. So what we're going to do today, again, is we're going to briefly take a look at why is creativity important, what is creativity, looking at the creative mindset, and then how to use that information in terms of you imagining and recreating or creating an environment conducive for creativity in your work situation. And then kind of the skills needed for leading creativity in your organization and or your classroom. So we're kind of looking at two worlds. We're looking at, we're using the business model because that's where most of the research has been done to date in implementing creativity to help organizations, business organizations move forward. But what can we take from business and apply to the classroom to help students achieve and to make sure that teachers' lives in particular are able to adapt to the ever-changing crapshoot of a environment that people will be working with in the fall. So again, some of this is repeat, and I'll go over it quickly for those who attended last week, but for those who didn't, there's some did you knows. So did you know that the business and corporate world, that creativity is the #1 most in demand essential skill? Now here's a listing from LinkedIn's December 2019 analysis of their network and job postings. It backs up the 2018 report commissioned by the Business Higher Education Forum that also recognizes creativity as a top human skill. And it corroborates the seminal 2010 IBM study of 1,500 CEOs that indicate that they believe more than rigor, more than management discipline, more than integrity or even vision, that successfully navigating an increasing complex workplace requires creativity. Now, creativity is now essential, if not vital, to the economic development and being competitive within the modern economy. Now, creativity researchers are finding that jobs that don't require some form of creativity will be increasingly outsourced and automated. So CEOs are confronted with massive shifts in their environment. You know, new government regulations, constant changes in global economic power centers, accelerated changes in how their industry operates. How similar is that to superintendents, principals, and teachers and what they're experiencing? You know, the new physical layouts of their school-based classrooms, adapting curricula and lesson plans to provide instructional virtually, and in some cases, perhaps even simultaneously, you know, half virtually and half in person at the same time. New ways of assessing and evaluating that are going to be needed, checking for understanding as they teach in real time, working with parents in new ways, handling the anxiety of teachers who are putting themselves at risk, working with a student population that may or may not be keeping up with social distancing or mask wearing outside of the school. These are new types of problems and issues for which there just aren't any ready-made solutions. There's nothing on the shelf. We're tilling new ground, and we need to create new solutions to plug into these problems. It requires a mind shift to break the functional fixedness of the past teaching practices that we've been using, all the previous procedures that we've been using in the way the actual content that's to be taught, as well as how we teach the content, and then even the learning outcomes. It's important that we have the outcomes need to represent the new skills that will be required to be considered successful, to be a successful student or employee down the road. Before moving forward with talking about the creativity mindset required for constructing a creative environment for creativity to thrive, it's important that, again, we have a common understanding of what creativity is and what it's not. And I apologize for the repetitiveness of those of you who attended last week. But we'll go through this very quickly to make sure we're all on the same page. So, did you know that the concept of creativity is a fairly recent idea? You know, the word was invented only in the 19th century. And in fact, it doesn't appear in English dictionaries until after World War II. Before then, imagination was the term used. And although imagination and creativity are linked, they're quite different. Creativity gurus and researchers, Kaufman and Sternberg, share that whereas the mind can imagine virtually anything, no matter how fantastical or implausible in real life, creativity is concerned with how to apply imagination in real life, with all its limitations, constraints, boundaries, and other practical considerations. Creativity researcher Robinson suggests that creativity is the meaningful application of imagination. So overall, creativity researchers and theorists over these 70 years since creativity has been studied in earnest, they've coalesced over a definition that I share here. That creativity is the ability or process to produce work that is novel and appropriate. So did you know that, here, work is the idea or product. Novel refers to something original and unique, and it needs to be appropriate to the situation, relevant to fit the problem at hand, and it needs to be useful. So in the way that we frame creativity in Drexel's Creativity and Innovation Program is a problem-based model where we take a look. Creativity is intentional, it's purposeful, and it's used to solve problems. So in trying to describe creativity, again, I use the umbrella method, where creativity is the skin or the covering in total is consider that to be creativity, but it's supported by these various factors, these subcomponents, if you will, of creativity, things such as risk-taking, fluency, flexibility, divergent thinking, and things, where originality is kind of like the umbrella stem, where it kind of like is kind of the central idea. But they all kind of work together, these components, to form this idea known as creativity. And so just quickly, so we have a common understanding of what we're talking about. The 11 factors are here. You can read the definitions, again, originality, elaboration, but some of the important, well, I consider to be more important, are things like risk-taking, the willingness to take chances. Because if you have a creative idea, and you're not willing to act upon it or share it, it kind of dies on the vine. And what's the purpose? You have related items such as resistance to premature closure, where you want to remain open to an idea, to consider lots of multiple solutions, and the tolerance of ambiguity, being comfortable in not knowing the immediate answer. They kind of work together. The longer that you are able to resist coming to closure with a solution, the more possibility there is for new ideas to enter into the situation for you to use in coming up with that new idea. And hence, you need to be able to tolerate ambiguity. You need to be comfortable living in a world where you don't automatically and instantly know the answer. Relatedly, there's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Research bears out that when one is doing something because they're intrinsically motivated, because it's something that they take pleasure or satisfaction in doing, they do things better. And they do it longer, and they're enjoying it. Where when they do things for extrinsic purposes, it's not the same. When they're doing it for a paycheck, they don't invest themselves, and they don't spend as much time doing things, and the products aren't as creative. What we're going to focus on right now really is the convergent and divergent thinking. Convergent thinking is, we'll start with divergent thinking, is exploring multiple pathways when you have a problem, and exploring lots of different solutions, and then using convergent thinking to narrow in on those various solutions, and then re-exploring them. And we have the problem-solving model, where you start off being divergent in your thinking, and then you have a lot of solutions, and then you pare down those solutions into a couple of different types of possibilities, and then you explore those possibilities in a divergent way, and then you close in again convergently, and you keep that pattern going until you're comfortable with a solution. And we thank Dr. Tanner and Dr. Reisman for creating this model. Dr. Reisman is on this in this meeting, and she is the founder of the School of Education, as well as the Creativity and Innovation programs. But the key research ideas that I want you to keep in mind is that research bears out that if you want to be creative, then the key is just to be creative. Commit to it. You've got to get out of your head and any negative thinking that you're not creative. Doesn't it irk you when your students kind of come into you saying things like, I'm not creative, I don't know it. I don't know how to be creative. You wonder what happened to them. And again, we'll go over the fourth grade slump in just a moment, but creativity also, research shows, can be taught. And some people may have a natural bent and proclivity towards being creative or acting in a creative manner, but it really comes, anyone can be more creative with practice and intentionality. Again, it's that fourth grade slump. Normally, it's where it kind of occurs. It's when students begin to start caring what others think, it happens with maturation. They start caring what other students think. You know, the schools and the teachers are trying to dictate their behavior and limiting the options to the right answer. Again, and as teachers, you really want to try and stay away from that and try and keep them open to being risk takers and to be creative as long as you possibly can, because once you hit a certain point, then it becomes part of you if you get through that process, and you'll have it forever. And then research shows that teachers who recognize and understand their own creative strengths are better able to recognize the creative strengths of their students, and thereby able to better adapt their instruction to the individual, using creativity to assist in that student moving forward. So we're going to take a moment and take a look at this activity that we use in our Tools and Techniques creativity course. It's from Bachalko and his Think Your Toys, a handbook of creative thinking techniques. But again, use your finger or use your mind's eye to try and link the 9 dots together with no more than 3 straight lines, which will cross all 9 dots without lifting your pencil. For time's sake, I'm going to spoil it for you. But a key to being creative is to start by challenging all assumptions. And as I state here, it's harder than you think. So if you've tried it, you're finding it difficult more than likely because you've bought into the common assumptions, but when most people take it, that one cannot extend line beyond the outside dots. The lines have to pass through the middle of each dot, where it's really not the case. And those weren't rules that were stated. People just kind of built into it because of the way that they've done problems and things before. There's always this boundary. And so the job of the teacher is to try and make sure that you don't keep those boundaries as you're developing new solutions for this new world in which we're working in. So there's the solution, again, breaking outside the line and hitting on the edge. But however, if I told you that I could actually use one straight line to connect all the dots, in not only one way, but 2 ways, would you believe me? I can hear you now. You're saying, no, impossible. I need to see it to believe it. Well, here it is. You just take the dots and you rearrange them. But most people would not think of it. They assume that because that's how it was presented to them, that that's the pattern that has to be. Again, you have to challenge all assumptions. There's also another way of doing it too. If you had a wide enough pencil or a paintbrush, you could do it with one straight line. And so, again, challenge all assumptions. Another technique that we use in the program to help shake things up is the false faces technique. It's a technique for reversing assumptions. And here's an abbreviated way about how it's done. First, you state the challenge, you list your assumptions about the challenge. You can 3 or 4 to begin with, and all this takes practice. The more you do it, the better you get. And then after you have your assumptions, you reverse each one of them. You write down the opposite of what that assumption is, and then you go through those reversed assumptions to try and solve that issue. The reversal and why it works is because it interrupts the conventional thinking pattern. The reversals free information up so that it can come together in new, what they call provocative ways. And so here's a sample. So state the challenge. In the Think Your Toys book, they use one of the examples is desire to start a new restaurant. The assumptions: restaurants have menus, makes sense. Restaurants charge money for food, that's a common assumption, and restaurants serve food. So let's do the next. We want to reverse each of those assumptions. So restaurants have no menus of any kind. Restaurants give food away for free. Restaurants do not serve food of any kind. Most people say, well, that's kind of bizarre for a restaurant. So now you have to ask yourself, staying true to this method, how do you accomplish each of these three reversals? No menus, giving food away, and not serving food. And so for the first one, restaurants have no menus. The chef could inform each customer that about what he bought at market that day. And then the customer can go through and look at what's appealing to them from that list he has of what he bought. And then the chef creates an individual dish for that customer. In terms of restaurants giving food away for free, customers can pay for the time being inside the restaurant instead of for the food itself. You can timestamp them when they get in. You can sell the beverages at cost. But again, they can have, the customer comes into the room, and no matter what's on the menu, they get it because they're paying for the time. Or to answer the third one, restaurants do not serve food of any kind. Create restaurants with a unique decor, exotic, industrial, Art Deco, one that might have a view overlooking, a national park or something. But people can bring their own food and pay for a service charge for operating in that location, or for eating in that location. So you have these three reversals, and you have solutions to them. And now and this is where, as the idea agent, as the person being creative, you have to decide which one works for you. And in terms of, for this book, the book chooses the chef informs each customer what he bought. So we're going without a menu. And so then you have to design how that's going to work, and how that might work. The chef creates an individual dish from the selected ingredients, and then the chef can name the dish after the customer, and upon exiting, the customer can receive a printout of that recipe to take home with them. To me, that sounds kind of pretty cool. But getting into mindset, we want, Teresa Amabile is a creativity guru and a research in the area, particularly in infusing creativity into business. And she offers us 6 lessons from the world of business that are transferable to the world of education and what I think good pedagogy. The first one is to challenge your students. You want to stretch them, not too far that they get lost and frustrated, but just enough so that they are piqued, their interest is piqued. But this requires that the teacher know their students very in depth, so they know what their limits are. There's freedom. Offer the student choices and build in space for each to decide how they wish to approach that particular learning outcome that you're teaching during the day, or teaching for that particular lesson. There's time and resources. Now, creativity can take time, and need time for incubation is often critical. So as Dr. Reisman shares, when your brain is in a fuzzy mess, it means that the brain is working. It's trying to make sense of the new inputted information, and it's trying to resolve those issues. It's when the fuzzy mess kind of goes away that the learning is stopped. When you're in the fuzzy mess, learning is occurring. When the mess clears, the learning is done. So you want to try and incorporate that into your instruction. You want to build in time and build in activities to work as a team or in groups, but also diverse groups. Again, it requires that the teacher understands the individuals so that they can pair the students up. And so you don't have all the leaders in one group and all the quiet people in the other, that you're providing groups and partnerships where the kids can begin to excel and work together and build their skills and working in teamwork. Schools need to prepare students for working collaboratively. it's what they're going to do in the workforce. To have them not work and only work alone in isolation, which is very rarely done in the workforce, is not serving the students, and it's not helping them with creativity. Again, and it needs practice. School is the place for that to occur. Teachers, like managers, get busy. It becomes easy to praise, to let praise for creative efforts, both successful and unsuccessful efforts, fall by the wayside. And this is an easy way to kill creativity. And the way to solve it is to not let it happen, to be cognizant, to be aware, to know that, and make it part of your daily routine to recognize creative efforts. Again, managers in business as well as teachers in classrooms can kill creativity within a student or an employee by failing to acknowledge the creativity and innovative efforts and also by squelching them, but that's a presentation unto itself, squelching. It's when you are giving students feedback that, oh, that won't work. It's already been tried, it won't be done. That type of language. You want to try and be positive about students' ideas when they're trying to be creative, because you do not want to set up a climate where they fear to try. You don't want to undermine their risk-taking or their intrinsic motivation that might exist. Teachers need to use their creativity, recognize that the creative potentials of their students and of their work. And then the teacher needs to be recognized. The school principal needs to recognize what the teachers are doing. And the way to do that, in my opinion, is to include creativity efforts in the evaluation of student work by the teacher. And then school leadership should support and encourage the teachers in the work by incorporating creativity efforts perhaps into the teacher's evaluation. In places where that won't happen, it's important that you continue to keep trying incorporating creativity into your classroom, whether you have a school leadership or not. I mean, there's many ways to I don't want to say hurt animals, because people might not like it, but there's many ways, as the saying goes, to skin a cat. You have to address a curriculum, but how you do it, there's a lot of leeway. Again, challenge assumptions. Just because it's the way you've been doing things before, it's the way the school tells you that this is the best way to do it. Try to change up those techniques, challenge the assumptions, and find new ways of doing it. Again, this is taking, I kind of timed it wrong. This is only supposed to be a half-hour meeting. So I'm going to quickly go through the misinterpretations of student and employee behaviors. Now, again, those who were here last week heard this, but it's often common for managers and teachers to misinterpret student behavior or employee behavior. Dislike of the routine type work, a preference for self-direction, daydreaming, a persistence in tasks that interest them, questioning personality. They go, why, but what if, but why? So the creative characteristics of a student is a high level of curiosity, preparedness to take risks, persistence. It requires high levels of energy, the ability to tolerate contradictions and ambiguities and uncertainties. You want to embrace change and process knowledge from a wide variety of fields. But a creative leader, to make sure the classroom runs smoothly, the most effective drivers of student engagement are trust in the process, trusting the students, trusting behaviors, trusting oneself, to develop appropriate challenges and demonstrate respect for the students, recognize the efforts being made, and having honest communication with the students. The creative leader has to set directions and expectations for the students, has to motivate their students, needs to provide the resources and share successes. And then most importantly, they need to be willing to get out of the way. I can't tell you how Dr. Reisman, who's been my mentor through my creativity process, has drummed that into my head. Get out of the way. Let the students try. And then your job as a teacher is to take the solution without squelching them, but guide them to tweak things so that they work and are appropriate. Teachers are idea champions when it comes to creativity. And you have to learn the language of creativity and innovation so that everyone's talking a common language, and it's not a one-time shot deal. It's a commitment to a sustained effort long-term, because this world is changing rapidly, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon. The School of Education's Creativity and Innovation programs are a resource that can be of value to you. We have an undergraduate certificate program, a graduate certificate program in creativity and innovation. We have non-credit workshops that will be offering soon, leading to badging and micro-credentials. We have a master's in creativity and innovation, as well as we can work with any graduate student at the university to build in a concentration in C&I. So again, I apologize for kind of rushing through that. I had more content than I needed, and take care of that next time it's offered. But let me hear some of your questions. I don't have the chat room open. I don't know, Jacqueline, if anyone has any questions or comments at the moment. But if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and share.
I have a question, Larry.
Okay.
We know that.
Okay, Dr. Eastman, I don't know, there's something that's gone amiss with your sound.
We know that.
So we're not gonna be able to take your question, Dr. R.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
There you are. No, you're there now. You're good now.
Okay, research has indicated that teachers do not recognize their creative students. And I just wondered if you had some ideas in terms of helping break that model where teachers think of the creative students as those who smile at them and agree with them. What can be done to break that?
Well, it comes down to understanding and recognizing that indeed those are issues and problems. So first, an awareness that creativity exists, that everyone is creative, creativity can be taught. There are assessments such as the Reisman Diagnostic Creativity Assessment and the Torrance Certificate of Creative Thinking and other surveys and instruments that will help identify creative strengths of kids as well as teachers. But as shared earlier, when teachers recognize their own creative strengths, they're better able to recognize the creative strengths of their students and alter their instruction to address and match those creative strengths to help the student move forward. Are there any other questions at this moment?
Yes, this is Sandy Friedman.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? I was very interested in your recommendation to think about group work, you know, in an online format. How do we assess students' creativity, you know, assessing leadership versus not, those types of things to compose the group in our classroom? So we would have to do some sort of assessment, I would think.
Well, and that's an assumption. And again, I encourage you to go back and challenge that assumption and what it means to assess creativity. I mean, the purpose for assessing individual creativity is what in your mind, and you can build, and it's going to differ from whatever creative activity you're having to do, what the assessment would be. But there could be a checklist about who, there's research dealing with, group structures. There's a leader, there's the doer, there's the people that kind of stand back and kind of chime in. And you could share, that group dynamics with the students, again, part of the open communication, and that you, and have them do do an activity in one way where you would, they naturally take the leadership roles, people fall into their category, and then you can purposely switch it up and see whether the solution changes or the result of the activity is different. But creativity, in my mind, isn't something to be graded, it's something to develop. And so your tool for measuring would be a instrument that shows progress. And again, that progress will be different for each student depending on where they start. So you need to come up with a rubric that, again, that is able to define where a student starts on this creativity journey and then how they progress. And that's going to be different for you than it would be for someone else that's participating in this session. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes.
Or is it helpful?
Yes. Thank you.
Other questions?
Larry, we do have questions in the chat. Do you think that this could be applicable to event planning?
Personally, I believe that creativity is applicable to everything. And so, yes, I do. Again, event planning in particular, there's that old story about, I think it's like 4 chimpanzees in the room and there's a step ladder and the banana hanging from the ceiling. And when the monkeys come in, it takes them a while, but eventually one of them goes up for the banana. And when that happens, the whole room is, all the monkeys are sprayed with water. And each time they go for the banana, they're sprayed with really cold water, so they become very unhappy. And the monkeys, those 4 monkeys, learn not to go for the banana. And so then they take out a monkey and put a new monkey in. That new monkey eventually, not having been involved in the situation earlier, will eventually go for that banana. And research has shown that those other monkeys will beat that monkey down because, again, they don't want the cold water. And eventually that monkey learns not to go for banana. Then they switch out another one. A new monkey comes in. So there's 2 original and 2 new. And the one that came in, the first one that was exchanged will join in the beating up of the new monkey to stop them from reaching that banana, because again, the 2 monkeys that were there do not want the cold water, and the other ones just now learned that you don't go for the banana. And then you keep switching them out until eventually you have 4 new monkeys that did not experience the cold water still not going for the banana. So there's that functional fixedness that goes on in any discipline that needs to be broken if you're going to be creative. And so not only does that happen in event planning, we need a table, we need to have balloons, we need to do this, we need to have it set up here. That's done because it's the way it's always been done. You forget the reasons why these things happen. And so I encourage the challenged assumptions to be used to get out of that mindset. But we also need it in not only elementary education, but we need it in businesses, we need it in STEM education, we need it in mathematics, we need it in all the subjects and in all areas, including our teacher education program, how we prepare teachers for this new world. We need it for running the university overall. And there's nothing I can think of that would not be applicable to and for creativity.
I have a question. So the example that you just gave, this monkey experiment, so that's a phenomenon that's happening with this 4th grade slum. Is that correct? It's like that situation where because it's different from what education was built to do, right? So it's structured, we want we want children or we want our students to do a certain thing at a certain time, and that's how we evaluate them, and that's how things are rewarded. Where, and I'm just kind of thinking, if you flip the script and instead of it's only going to the ladder that gets the cold water, it's not other innovative things. So if the monkeys were trying to like stand on each other's backs to get the banana, they wouldn't get cold water. So is that kind of how you would see like changing your classroom? It's like, if you do the expected, you're not going to get that praise and that attaboy or attagirl. But if you do something unexpected, that's what I give praise to. Is that?
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, that can be part of it, but the fourth grade slump is more complex than that. I mean, it's
Obviously,
natural
children are more
psychology
complex than
in
monkeys.
children that they want to belong to a group. And so
Right. Okay.
their peers will try and slap them down to boot. But teachers will begin to say, no, you're no longer in second grade, you're in third grade, and then third grade and fourth grade, this is how we do things. You're no longer a child, no longer a baby. You now have to do it this way. We put our books in this order. We put our pencils here. We color inside the lines. We do certain things. And that's what you kind of want to break.
And that's the industrialization of school, right? Because we
Very
want
much
everyone to act this way and sit this way so that you can become a good worker when you're.
Well, that's why schools were invented back in the day.
Cool.
I mean,
Thank you.
because we had the Industrial Revolution came and we needed workers, and we needed workers to have a certain level of skill, and that's how they were prepared. They weren't prepared to be entrepreneurs. They weren't prepared to start their own businesses. They weren't prepared to not fit the norm. In fact, all society, as well as teachers and peers, kind of forced conformity. And so you want to fight that conformity. You want to not only praise creative ideas that work, but you want to praise the efforts being made to be creative, because that, there's lessons to be learned in failures. And that's where the teacher comes in. When a creative idea fails, go back to it. What could have been tweaked for that idea to have worked in this particular problem? And that takes a new type of pedagogy. It takes a new type of lesson planning. And again, is it going to look the same when you do it in person as it does when you do it online? And how do you handle it when you're doing half the classes online and the other classes in the room with you? Again, and that's where the trust comes too of the students. You're going to need at times, if you're in that environment, the in-person folks might be doing something and you're operating differently with the online folks. And so it's a dance, and it's one that has yet to be created. And it's kind of an exciting time to be a teacher because the rule book is being tossed out. But again, the assessment of teachers and the assessments to judge and evaluate students has not been tossed out. And so there's going to be that conflict of having to do things in a new way, having new outcomes. And now's the time to kind of change those outcomes, to making sure that the students are being prepared for the workforce that they're going to face when they come out, rather than the workforce that will no longer be in existence. Jacqueline, any other questions online or in the chat room?
Yes, we do have another one. The last one is, how could I apply these ideas or perspectives of creativity to the military, since it's such a rigid and historically difficult to introduce creativity?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because the father of creativity, E. Paul Torrance, actually began creativity and researching creativity in the 50s as part of the military. So creativity actually stems from the military. So again, I think the assumption is not correct. Again, the military, in fact, in the 80s and 90s, Dr. Eastman was working with the ROTC, we had students who were in the ROTC leadership who were going to get certified to be teachers. So when they left the military, they would work as teachers. But the military was very interested in using creativity assessments, including the Torrance test of creative thinking, to decide whether or not a ROTC person had the skills to be a leader. The Army, not the Army, but the military in general, I think really does appreciate creativity because it's always changing. Strategies need to change. The way war is being fought and the way people are reacting to war is always constantly shifting and changing. The technology, you know, drones and lasers, and you know, with the soon-to-be space race, you know, with lasers in the sky, all that is going to change the way the military operates. So they're looking for creative people. Will there always be a grunt type mentality for those that have to do the non-thinking work? I don't know. I mean, I don't know today's military to really answer that question. But if you do, then think about it. Again, write down the assumptions, reverse them, and see whether or not you can come up with some solutions. But in my mind, military is pro creativity. Okay, well, unless there's any other immediate questions, if you have questions after this, you have my email address. I'm always willing to talk with you. And if you have any questions about the upcoming workshops and non-credit badging and micro-credentialing, please reach out. Andrea Guy is also on this in this meeting, and she will assist me in responding to your questions. But I thank you so much for your time. I apologize for going over time, but contact me and let's talk.
This was wonderful. Thank you
Wonderful.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.